Well, welcome to Don't Know Much About with me, Dr. Naya Lekht, where curiosity kicks off the conversation. And today, we're in for a real treat as I sit down for a conversation with Nicole Bernstein. Nicole is the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors and the first American-born child of an Israeli immigrant family. Raised between two nations and fluent in both English and Hebrew, her unique bicultural perspective informs her approach to life, business, politics, and civic engagement. Nicole's career began as a high-tech executive in Silicon Valley and Tel Aviv, where her startup was recognized in 2007 as Israel's top 10 best women-led companies. In 2011, she shifted her professional focus to political advocacy and community organizing, leading the San Diego chapters of Stand With Us and AIPAC for over a decade. Being the visionary that she is, in 2021, she co-founded Pure K12, a nonprofit dedicated to unapologetically combating institutionalized Jew hatred in K-12 education through strategic advocacy, grassroots mobilization, political engagement, and enforcement of legal protections. Nicole currently resides in San Diego with her husband and two sons who attend their local public schools. So welcome, Nicole, to Don't Know Much About with me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So my show has a tagline, and the tagline is, it all starts with a question. And so I'm going to kick it off with a question. What would be your tagline? What best summarizes your philosophy, your approach to life, and all the things that I listed about what you do?
Okay, so my tagline, which has been my tagline for as long as I can remember, I didn't even realize it was a tagline. It was more just how I operate, which is, if you will it, it is no dream.
Wow. So for our listeners and viewers, this is also the famous quote attributed to Theodor Herzl, if
Correct.
You will it, it is no dream. Theodor Herzl, it's an interesting, so you know, in my introduction, I introduced you as a child of immigrants.
Yes.
You were born here though, right?
I was born here, yes.
Okay. But so you kind of find yourself kind of straddling the Israeli and American Jewish worlds. Theodor Herzl had a dream.
Yep.
I often
a crazy dream.
A crazy
An
dream.
insane dream.
Yes. Well, it is insane, but it also is, not to take away anything from Theodor Herzl, I don't think it solely belongs to him. I think he tapped into the Jewish people's longing for Zion. Of course, he was interested more in modern statehood, but be as it may, the dream has been fulfilled. We have, thank God, reestablished the Jewish state.
Yes.
And in many ways, the reason that he thought to create a state was a response to antisemitism that he saw all over Europe. Scanning the European globe, he couldn't believe his eyes that modernity basically failed. It failed the Jews. And he said, you know what? I have an idea. I have this amazing nonprofit. It's called the Jewish State. And so tell me, why then we have this dream, but I mean, the Jewish community is still suffering. There's antisemitism. It didn't solve it. What are your thoughts about that?
So I think another kind of angle to this is that the dream was the dream of reestablishing the state of Israel was in response to the Holocaust, which is false. And that is something that I think is a very big misconception. But yes, the state of Israel was reestablished. I'm not sure most people know that it's only the third time in the history of the planet that Jews have had self-determination in our ancestral homeland. And so, it's a big deal. It's a bigger deal than I think most people are even willing to acknowledge. But I think that one of the dangers of saying, okay, we checked that box, was that we become complacent because we did lose that autonomy twice before. And there's no real reason why that couldn't happen again. We just have to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And that is very complicated.
Wow. My husband, so just like you, I do a lot of advocacy for the Jewish people here in America. And of course, it's tied to Israel right now because that's where today's Jew hatred is located.
Focused.
It's an anti-Zionism. It's a demonization of Israel. And my husband always says, look, you take it for granted. If you look at history and zoom out, we had our sovereignty much less than when we had it.
Correct.
And so he always reminds me that, gosh, and it's scary that it's not a guarantee. It's not a guarantee. And so, but here's a question that I have for you that's probably a little bit maybe uncomfortable, challenging, but you and I live in the United States of America. Why should we as Americans be advocating for, why should we not be complacent? Why? I mean, it's thousands of miles away.
Right.
Why are we doing this?
Well, that's actually a less complicated question for me, just because I grew up in the States, but in an Israeli home. We moved to Israel when I was a kid, and so I went to school there. I went to school here. We kind of bounced between the two countries a lot. But I think one of the things that I see a lot, and this is where I try to put myself into the shoes of American Jews who don't have the same sort of background or experience that I do, is this sort of taking things for granted, taking for granted that Israel has always been there or will always be there. And so they're treating it as something that is obvious, which it's not.
Do you think that Israelis have a larger sense of urgency than American Jews? Do you think that Israeli Jews live day to day knowing that there's a real existential threat?
Absolutely. And it's not a post October 7th occurrence. Yeah, it's always sort of been there. And I think, one funny way that I like to explain it sometimes is the vast majority of Israelis do not really have a savings account. Like the idea of a 401k, it exists, but most people don't save for the far off future because they don't know what will happen. And so they very much live in the moment. You see, all these indexes coming out of happiest countries in the world, and Israel is consistently in the top 10, I think in the top 5 the last few years, including post October 7th. But I think this is like you live in the moment and you enjoy. So you make all this money and you earn all this money, and then you go take an amazing trip, right? I mean, Israelis are sort of known for going out and traveling the world. No matter where you are in the world, you're going to bump into an Israeli. And it's because of that. They're very much like, I'm going to go see it now because I don't know what's going to be next year. And I think that is like a really fundamental difference. And so that's pre-October 7th, that's always been the case. And I think also they know, like, they're in a different, they're in a very complicated neighborhood.
Yes.
And they have always been in a very complicated neighborhood.
Absolutely. Something that you're basically touching on is the difference between American Jewry and Israeli Jewry. People talk about the widening gap, the shrinking gap between the two communities. What's interesting about your observation is that you're saying basically Israeli Jews, unlike American Jews, understand the urgency because they live in this moment. Whereas American Jews think, oh, it's always been this way. But I have to tell you something, and please correct me if I'm wrong. Again, this is the place to do it.
Yeah.
When I came across this anti-Semitism, or known as anti-Zionism, it was the early 2000s. I was just a student on my campus. Then it was in grad school, and I just saw it just surge and just become worse and worse and worse. And one thing that I found incredibly frustrating is that the Israelis did not understand anti-Semitism in America or in abroad. They didn't take, for instance, BDS very seriously in the beginning when we tried to, with different organizations, tell them.
Yeah.
And so can you talk about that? So on the one hand, they are faced with imminent threat, whereas we're not so much. But they seem to have, maybe it's changed, but they seem to have some sort of disconnect with the way that American Jews are experiencing anti-Semitism.
It's actually still there to this day. it's very interesting to me how many Israelis do not really understand what anti-Semitism, in the way that people who do not live in Israel understand it. And it's fascinating to me because this is really where, I've often described my childhood as having one foot here and one foot in Israel, and sort of being this, kind of two sides of one coin. But when I'm there, I'm trying to explain how Americans view things to my family, to my friends, to just whoever. And when I'm there, and when I'm here, I'm trying to explain what it's like for Israelis. And so I feel like I'm constantly trying to explain half of my understanding of the world and half of my mindset to my other half. And it is actually very surprising to me that not only in the early 2000s did Israelis not understand BDS and what it could mean, they still, after October 7th, are shocked. And I mean, shocked that there's anti-Semitism, on college campuses in America or in K-12 or anywhere. And I'm often kind of like, maybe you guys are just too busy surviving to notice what's going on. But I've been saying it for many, many years. And at least for the last decade, every time I've gone back for a visit, I've talked about it with my family in Israel, and they are always surprised. And there's a huge disconnect there. And so I think there's a major disconnect with how Americans understand Israeli Jews, but there's definitely the reciprocal going in the other direction. They do not understand anti-Semitism in the diaspora.
Right. But as I'm thinking this through with you, it kind of also makes sense because they are the dominant. They are not the other. They're living with Jews. They don't have an ethnic studies to worry about, right? Curriculum. They don't have an SJP. They don't have really a BDS internally. Their enemies, their foes are, as you say, in this Middle East neighborhood.
Yeah.
But that could be one of the reasons they haven't experienced what we're experiencing. We are still living as minorities in the United States of America. Right?
Absolutely. I mean, when you're in Israel, you don't actually think about being Jewish. You don't have to think about it. You just be. Right. You just are. And so, I mean, you don't have to be religious. You don't even have to believe in God. Right? In Israel, you go to the corner store on a Friday morning and, you pay the cashier and they say Shabbat Shalom. You get into the cab and they say Shabbat Shalom or Chag Sameach. And, they just go on and it's sort of taken for granted there, but they don't really think about it. And they don't consider themselves to be Jews the way that we have to really think about it and be intentional about being Jewish, here. There, it's very different. And I think, one of the things that made me cringe, I guess, when I started to see what was going on, ethnic studies, is this focus on identity politics, but the worst kind of identity politics. And in Israel, you do see people identifying themselves not as this kind of Jew or that kind of Jew, but they identify as part of some sort of, there's the progressives, right? And then there's the religious. And then there's they have these identity groups almost as if, in Congress, they have caucuses. It's like that.
Interesting.
Far more than it is the Jewish part of their identity because they haven't ever really had to think about it. It's just always been.
Right. Well, let's switch over then, since we both of us referenced ethnic studies.
Yes. Let's talk about the big elephant.
Let's talk about the big elephant. But before I do, I want to just preface by saying you've had a career for many years in the nonprofit Jewish world. I've dealt with this in previous episodes of the legacy organizations, the Jewish nonprofits. Why do you think that they are struggling to do what they were mandated to do by the mission statement that they sought out to do, which is protect Jews?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons. I am not sure that the mandate, maybe that the community thought that they had, was actually what their mandate was. I do also think that when some of these organizations were formed more than 100 years ago, there was a very different experience of Jewish life here in the States. And so they were set up for one thing, but as all things Jewish, it evolved, right? And so one of the things that kind of was a little surprising to me when we first started dealing with what was going on in the schools is we would take this to some of the legacy orgs and they would say, well, this isn't in our mission statement. This isn't part of what we're supposed to be dealing with. And so we don't even have anybody here who can help you because this isn't what we do. And that was really surprising because it had to do with anti-Semitism showing up in curriculum. And to have big legacy orgs say, we don't do that, at first was very annoying, I will admit. But then I started really thinking about it, and they actually were not equipped at all to deal with what was going on. Because they're very focused on creating Jewish community, Jewish community issues, Jewish community goals, but they weren't focused on trying to embed themselves in either the educational system, the public education system, or the political system. And that is, I think, where the big kind of mix up is, that what we're seeing in schools, what we're seeing on college campuses, it's not about education, even though it is manifesting in educational spaces, but it's not an education problem.
So
it's not even a curriculum problem.
Wow. Okay. Continue.
It's politics. Okay.
Tell me more.
Okay.
About this.
So the reason why the big legacy orgs can't deal with this is because they're not political organizations.
Or they don't want to be, at least.
They don't want to be, but I even if they wanted to be, I'm not sure they could make that pivot because politics is very specific. And this is where our detractors really got it right. They looked at the situation in the West, what were the weak spots, and they used very old, ancient ideas, they reimagine them for a modern,
Audience.
sensibility, and they thrust into the West with a political agenda. And that is why they have been succeeding, because while all of these other organizations, for example, are still very much focused on community, on being there for community, on being a gathering space for Jewish community, there's no problem there. I mean, there are problems there, but that's not what this problem is. And
what would it take to be political then? What would it take then to take that political step?
Well, one of the hardest things that I don't know if the Jewish community writ large in the U.S. is really willing to do is to stop identifying themselves as Democrats or Republicans or independents. We're Jews. And if we don't start thinking and operating politically as Jews, we are never actually going to be able to stop this.
What does that mean, though?
Well, you look at any other group, community, identity in the US, and you will find across the political spectrum so many examples of that identity or that group engaging in politics. You look at the African American community. Now, it's not like they're one mind. They're not a monolith, just like we're not, but they engage politically, right? There's political movements. They are very focused on getting political, I'll call it power, but it's representation, right? They don't want any conversations happening where things that affect their lives, and I mean everything that affects their lives, are being decided without them having representation there. And I remember distinctly, and this is what, during my time at AIPAC, when the Iran deal, the JCPOA, so that started coming up in conversations in 2014, 15, and then in 2016. So there was this conversation about what are we going to do with Iran and should we have a deal? And many of the, at the time, Jewish members of Congress were very, very hesitant about making any sort of public statements about it because they didn't want to appear too Jewish. And it was interesting because never has that been a concern of the Hispanic caucus, the Black caucus, the Women's caucus, the Progressive caucus, I could go on and on.
But if I may push back respectfully,
Sure.
I'm not sure if and again, please correct me because you're really the expert in this. I don't think that Jews have not embraced politics. I actually think the Jews have been embracing. So you have the Jewish Caucus of California, which has been a political arm of the Democratic Party in many ways. So I'm not really sure.
Yeah, but what's interesting about the Jewish caucus, and you're right, there is a Jewish caucus. They're not all Jewish in the caucus. There are non-Jews in that caucus, which is, I think, pretty cool. But that means that they're always trying to make sure that they're not solely focused on Jewish issues. So what is the point of having a Jewish caucus if that Jewish caucus is dealing with homelessness in California and energy?
Let me ask you this, just again, educate me. For instance, the Black caucus, are they solely focused on issues that affect the Black community?
Yes.
I see.
Now, it's, again, there are going to be outliers. You're going to see things like energy bills, being discussed in the Black caucus as it affects Black communities. Okay, they talk about immigration as it affects Black communities. They talk about as it affects
their community.
That's the point of having the caucus, is you're looking at things through your lens, right? So it's not that they only will deal with, but they're looking at everything that's going on. How does it affect my community? And that is not how the Jewish caucus operates here in California. I don't think it's how it operates in other states. We don't have a Jewish caucus in Congress because you don't want to appear to fall into any of the libels of dual loyalty or, too much power, controlling the world. Like if you had a Jewish caucus in Congress, can you imagine what everybody would talk about? But no one ever says that about any of the other caucuses. And so I often see things coming out of legislations, Congress, even, here in California, that are actually very good for the Jewish community. But because, for example, they were brought by the opposite party to whatever you are, you're going to oppose it, regardless of the fact that it actually benefits your community. But because it was the opposite party, they will not support it. That is a very fundamental problem that until we figure out how to overcome that, we're not going to be political as Jews. Now, just to kind of go back, yes, there are a lot of Jewish people engaged in the political process, not as Jews. And they might say that they are engaged as Jews.
But they say, that's the thing.
But they're not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. But for them, pushing a reform about homelessness or energy bills and environmentalism, they say that this is because they are Jewish.
Right.
This is a Jewish cause. They've kind of codified this into some sort of Jewish social justice, tikkun olam, tzedek, tirdof, justice shall you pursue. So for them, it's funny. And I've talked to some of them. They're not bluffing. They're 100%. They
really believe it.
They really believe that this is their calling as Jews. So it's
because they have a fundamental misunderstanding of what tikkun olam means, and so that starts from that fundamental misunderstanding that, like, and I'm not religious. I am very Israeli in that sense. I am very, very secular, but I know my history, like my history, my people's history, and when I see things like tikkun olam being used in a way that is not at all actually what it was supposed to be used as, you can see where that comes from. There's an origin story to the American idea, the American Jewish idea of tikkun olam. And it's not actually what it was meant to be. So it's been modified.
Absolutely. And I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I say this at every chance I get, so I'm going to say it again. When I was younger, I went to a Jewish day school. My parents sent me to Reform and then conservative Jewish day school. And I will never forget, on our walls, there was the words tzedek, tirdof, which is justice shall you pursue, right?
Right.
And so myself and my peers, naturally, we believed that Judaism is justice. It's not wrong, okay? But it was not until I was in college that I went to Chabad on campus, and it was probably some learning session. And here I hear the phrase tzedek tzedek tirdof is 3% of the entire phrase, which is justice, justice shall you pursue in the land that I, God, have given unto you. And I thought to myself, oh my God, this is a completely different formulation of it's about what it means to rule as just sovereigns on your own land.
Yes.
And so,
I mean, not to take from a very infamous statement, at this point, but it depends on the context, right? And without the context,
yes,
when you take something out of context and use it, it changes the meaning of it. Yes. Now you can do that, and I mean, obviously you can do that, but if you're doing that without actually understanding what that context is in the first place, then it sort of becomes something different. I'm not saying that different thing is bad. I'm just saying it's not what you think it is. And that's something that also I try to explain to people all the time. One of the things that I just remember growing up, whenever I'd be around other Jewish people, which was not often, like American Jewish people, because, we grew up Israeli style. We were not members of synagogue. We did not go to Jewish, summer camp, none of that. But it was interesting to me how little the American Jewish friends, or people who I knew about things. Like, super simple, the story of Hanukkah. Most American Jews think that the story of Hanukkah is a festival of lights.
Yes.
And I'm like, well, what's the point of the lights? Well, I don't know. It's the festival of lights. Yes. It's like, but what happened? It was like Judah Maccabee, and they something with the temple, and they found some oil, and it was, like a miracle. I'm like, well, what was the miracle?
Right.
And they don't know. And it's really fascinating to me because they all went to Jewish summer school or summer camp and Jewish schools and everything. I'm like, I went to public school my whole life, but I know the story of Hanukkah. I know the story of actually all of our holidays. And I make a very big point now of talking about that with my kids. I mean, I remember a Jewish friend also, we were talking about Shavuot, and she's like, oh, it's kind of like this fake holiday. I'm like, okay, first of all, Shavuot is probably one of the biggest ones.
Right.
Ever. You can't say that's like a made up pretend holiday. So there's a fundamental difference of what American Jews understand as their history, as their place, as their, what it means to be Jewish versus my Israeli experience.
Right.
Like, everything is about the history of the people, what we went through, how hard it has been to have lost sovereignty, right? And be exiled as slaves into the Roman Empire, right? Like, how did Jews end up in Europe? Everyone just thinks they just popped up there, they just emerged. No, there's a backstory.
Right.
How did they end up in
Arab lands?
Arab lands.
And what happened to them in Arab lands? Absolutely.
Yes.
Right.
No one knows about that. So I think that when I talk about politics in the States and Jews engaging in politics as Jews, that's what I'm talking about. It's you looking at things that are going on. How does it affect the Jewish community?
Can I push back again?
Yes.
Because I think it's interesting. As you're talking, something else came up for me. You said that when we began this conversation, you said that you find identity politics to be dangerous.
Yeah.
How is this not identity politics just for us?
I mean, it is, but if everyone else is playing dodgeball and you're over there playing ping pong, you're going to get hurt. Unless you start engaging in the game that everybody else is playing, first of all, not only are you never going to win, because you can't win dodgeball by playing ping pong, you're going to get hurt. And so identity politics, fine, let's do it, but let's actually do it. What I see happening is the identity being progressive Jew, conservative Jew, Republican Jew, Democrat, it's like that pits our community against each other from the get-go. What would it look like if we had a Jewish caucus full of progressive Jews, conservative Jews, Republican Jews, Democrat Jews, independent Jews, atheist Jews? That caucus would actually be a representation of the Jewish community here in America, for example, with all of its complexities. We would be able to argue, as we love to do internally, right, on the issues, and then come out of it with a policy of the Jewish caucus that does actually cover as many of the bases as possible that define the community. But we're not doing that right now. So you have Jews in that camp, you have Jews in this camp, you have Jews over here and Jews over there, and they won't even talk to each other. That's a problem.
Yeah, I understand you. I do. This is not a new phenomenon. Maybe you'll disagree with me, but there's this sort of idealization of Jewish unity that we all should kind of speak in one voice.
It has literally never happened.
But it's never happened.
Like in the history of the Jews, ever.
So I don't know, to be honest with you, what perhaps, I don't know what would happen if we would bring all these, different Jews. I don't know if they would even agree to even a mission statement. I'm not even sure.
That is correct.
But I want to say a few other things, which it was a very interesting analogy. You're not going to win dodgeball by playing ping pong.
Yeah.
Ping pong. Sorry. And it's an age-old question of strategy. And the larger question that we should be asking, what's our end goal? Like, what's my end goal? What's your end goal? And initially, my end goal is, combat anti-Semitism, make it better for Jews. But I personally have shifted.
Yeah.
Because I think that this, as I've said many times, the proliferation of anti-Semitism, the warning signs of anti-Semitism signal to far greater dangers of the breakdown of democracy, of liberalism, and all that. Okay? Yeah. So I worry. My only concern is when you play the rules of the game of identity politics, you reinforce the dodgeball. And maybe you'll have a better chance at winning that round, but do I want to play dodgeball? Is that what I want to play for the rest of my life? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'll see you and I'll raise you one, right?
Okay.
Look at what's going on in Israel. Very few people, including American Jews, really understand the intricacies of politics inside Israel. You do have a situation there where it's all Jews, mostly Jews.
Yes.
And everybody disagrees with everybody else to the nth degree. And it's not pretty. It doesn't always go smoothly. In fact, I don't think it's ever gone smoothly, but at least you have them engaging on the issues amongst themselves. And they're sort of keeping each other honest to some degree. It does go off the rails. And, we can talk about that maybe in a different podcast, but it's important that we understand. Let's go back. Okay, dodgeball. By the way, definitely not my favorite game when I was a kid.
I loved it.
I was not into it, probably because I got hit in the face one too many times, but with that dodgeball. But it does teach you that the world is a very dangerous place. Okay. And if you do not learn to engage with the danger, confront it head to head, you're always going to be on the losing side. Now, this idea of combating anti-Semitism, I don't even know where you would begin because it's so ingrained there's so many concepts of ancient anti-Semitism that have become modern anti-Semitism. I don't even like the word anti-Semitism, by the way. Cannot stand it. It was invented by someone who hates us.
Absolutely.
To sanitize the hatred as something, I'm anti-vax, I'm anti-Jew, I'm anti-Sem. It's hate. It's othering. Yes. It's that group of people over there is not going to conform to what I think and what I want them to think. Therefore, they're bad. I will kill them. That's a dangerous concept in general. And you see that concept showing up over and over and over again in all kinds of countries, and many of them don't have any Jews at all. You look at the Chinese Cultural Revolution. That was all about othering, right? You look at Rwanda, okay? It was othering. There's a group and there's another group and they're going to be against each other, right? So anytime you have this othering, those guys and us, bad guys and the good guys, it's a problem. So everything, you could say, is a really big game of dodgeball. But the problem is, I don't see any big orgs, legacy orgs.
Grassroots.
I mean, there are very few handful of grassroots orgs that are engaging in the game of dodgeball. But the problem is, because we are so small, we end up getting more wrath and sort of distance from other Jewish orgs that it makes it very hard for us to operate, even if we're willing to be on the front line of that dodgeball game and take all the hits. In order to protect the others in the back, our others, there's something very, I don't even know the right word to use. There's a bad thing happening, let's call it bad, of big legacy orgs that have all of the money and all of the budgets from all of these very well-meaning donors. They don't actually know what to do with it. So they're kind of trying a bunch of things. But because they're not playing dodgeball, they're spending so much money playing ping pong and like other, fun games that they're not training everybody to play dodgeball and to know that you're going to get hit in the face a lot. And you better learn to duck and catch the ball and throw it back really hard. So them not understanding what the game is, and then seeing a few other small orgs that do understand the game, but then...
Do you think they're threatened by that?
100%. And I don't really understand why, because I really have very rarely seen grassroots orgs think that they're going to take the place, or, become the go-to. That's not, first of all, why they were created.
I'm going to say something, and I may get a lot of hate for this, but it's okay. I'm used to this. I have a loud mouth. I've always had one. That's okay. I think, and this is terrible of me to even entertain this thought, but I think that there is something there's an ego here,
Yes.
There's an ego. We dominate this space. We speak for the Jewish community.
We got this.
We got this. And this idea...
We are the experts. That's my favorite.
We are going to take care of this behind the scenes, by the way. That's another one.
Behind the scenes, behind closed doors,
Yeah,
quietly.
Can we talk about the behind closed doors?
The shtetl mentality is what I call it.
Why? Tell me.
Because you don't want to rock the boat, and you don't want to go out too forcefully. You don't want to make waves, because that will make the Jewish community look bad. Don't be too aggressive. Don't be too this. Don't be too this. It's like you're playing a game by somebody else's rules that they set up for you, but the rules that they gave you were intentionally created for you to lose. And you just go along with playing with those rules. The shtetl mentality is, we spent longer in the diaspora than we did under our own self-rule, which means, and by the way, most Jews don't know this, that the entire time in the diaspora, I don't know, maybe a handful of times, Jews out there even had citizenship in the countries that were allowing them to exist on condition of, I use the phrase beyond the pale all the time. Where does that phrase come from? Well, the Pale of Settlement.
Right.
Well, what is the Pale of Settlement? It's the place where it was like a crappy place.
Man's land.
It's no man's land. It was like a shitty place to live, right? Pardon my French.
It's okay.
That's where they put the Jews. So if you go beyond that, it's worse than the worst. People use that phrase all the time here. They don't even know that that's connected to, it's worse than they treated the Jews. When you say something beyond the pale, it's worse than how Jews were treated. That's how bad that is.
Right.
People don't even understand that. So you're playing by the shtetl mentality rules that were created to keep you in the Pale of Settlement or beyond.
So and that's what you think is happening when you're doing this behind closed doors. We've got this. I also think it's
don't make waves.
I think it's also an attempt to hold on to that power. We get to talk to the big guys. I'm talking to the director of this, the executive director of that. We've got this. And the thing is, I'm not sure if they've got this.
They don't got it. Not only do they not got it, at this point, so many of those very, exclusive meetings that happen behind closed doors have not been happening. Or if they do happen, it's all just They happen. You sit. You say what you need to say gently, delicately. You don't want to be seen to be too aggressive. God forbid. Okay. But asking for help.
Right. But I
Don't
also
be
think
aggressive.
because they believe in bridge making and coalition building, and they think it's important to not lose the context. So you can't, organizations that are younger, smaller, more maverick tend to take risks, and the risk could be you can get annihilated. Maybe they can't take that risk.
Well, I don't know if it's being annihilated, but I think it is being seen as equals. And I think that is maybe the fundamental difference of the approach is when you see a maverick grassroots org going in head to head, there's an assumption that grassroots org is somehow equal to who's sitting across the table from them.
I see.
Which, by the way, is a very American idea to me, because the whole point of America was that you would come here without needing to be a lord or a lady or a sir or, a titled,
You don't have a title.
royal.
You don't need a title, right.
You come here, you work hard, you do well. Mm-hmm. You could come from nothing, which I did, and my parents certainly did, and no English, by the way, and like $50 in their pocket, which was a fortune to them. And they made it. They made it in the sense that they worked hard and they saved, and the more they saved, the more they, were able to do. And me and my two sisters, we were born here. I consider that to be the biggest privilege of my life. We're talking about privilege in America these days. It is a privilege to be an American citizen. And one of the things that drives me crazy is when I see all these young people today who don't even understand that privilege, and they use it as a slur. And I can promise you, all of my cousins on both sides wish they had the privilege of the choice that I have to live here or to be in Israel. That's my choice. Not so sure maybe my choice, lately. Sometimes I'm very vocal about like I would rather be there, because I have a privilege to be here and to fight the fight here. Now, I think, going at these big problems as an equal out in the open where people can see you arguing as a Jewish person, equal status to the other people here. I mean, it's like, I don't think that's how they're thinking about it consciously, but I think that's the shtetl mentality that comes out,
which is interesting because they think that people like you or I who lean into our particularism, who want to be seen as Jews, we are the shtetl mentality, by the way. Whereas they're they would say that they are operating on a bigger stage. They are the universalists. We are the myopic kind of backward people going back to our little insular community. Be your little Jew self. That's just what I've encountered. But as we're wrapping up, and we're talking about big organizations, I want to talk about little ones and yours.
Yes.
Tell us about Pure K12 and when it was formed, how. We don't have too much time, but please tell us.
Right. So Pure K12 started, it's 3 moms in San Diego who were hearing about a lot of examples of anti-Semitism happening in classrooms and schools. And
what year? It
started in 2020, really. But we didn't come up with a name until 2021. But the 3 moms were there early on. And, all school went online. All of us suddenly were inside of our kids' classrooms because everything was Zoom. And people started hearing things that really shocked them. And personally, I think if COVID had not happened, I don't think there would be a real awareness of just how bad things had gotten in curriculum development in K through 12
lots
classrooms.
of parents got a front row seat
in like a lot of different directions, not just anti-Semitism. But we started hearing about those incidents, and parents didn't know how to deal with this. And me, with my background on a lot of the material was fake news on Israel, on what was going on there. And it didn't even matter what the material was that were given in any given class. I have all of the context and the background to know that that was false. And here's what actually happened in 1973 and in 1967 and in 1950. Like, I know the history of every single war that happened in Israel, and I could give them that information. One of our others used to be a school board member. She also was a founder of the charter school in San Diego, the Hebrew language charter school. There's one Hebrew language charter school in San Diego called Kavod. And Tamar Caspi, she was the founder of that. And she was also a school board member. And so she knew the intricacies of dealing with school boards and school districts. And there's a lot of laws and regulations that control that. And she really understood that. And then we just started helping parents. And the more we started helping, the more we realized that this was a very big problem. And then May 2021 came around, and there was, I don't know what the right word is, but Hamas started sending thousands of rockets into Israel, and Israel responded, and, there's all that stuff happened. That's when you started to see Jews in America being beat up in Los Angeles, in Times Square, because they're Jewish, in reference to what was going on in Israel. And that was a turning point, I think, for many American Jews. But for us, we also started seeing it in schools. One example, 7th grader was wearing a hat with the letters IDF on it. No logo, nothing else. And another 7th or 8th grader, it's a middle school, came up to him and threw him up against the locker and said, "Go back into the oven, dirty kike, you baby killer." Okay. We're talking about an onion worth of layers of Jewish hate tropes that a 7th grader knew the word kike. I thought the kike word was dead. It is not. And that's when we really started to mobilize. And we realized that we had to come up with, something to, I guess, frame this all in. We did go to legacy orgs. They told us this was not in their purview. They were not set up to deal with this. And so we decided to just do it on our own, and we formed the organization, and we just started helping. One of the first things we did was we passed resolutions condemning anti-Semitism in school districts. We did reference IRA, and, looking back on it now, my views have actually evolved a little bit on IRA. We can maybe talk about that some other time, but we did include references to IRA. Meaning you can't condemn anti-Semitism unless you know what it is. And it is the only hate that has an actual internationally recognized definition. It's a working definition. It's not legally binding, but you can at least use it to say this is or this isn't. Personally, I think Sharansky's 3Ds is a far better way to determine. It also explains,
it's anti-Jewish.
Anti-Jewish, because I think that is, it's in my opinion, it's more clear and specific, and by the way, can also be used to describe other hates, not just anti-Semitism. So that's how Pure K started. And we passed the resolutions, and we started helping parents. And there were incidents that were happening. There's a complaint process. There's all kinds of things that as a parent you can do to protect your child, but complaints from Jewish parents were not being handled the way that complaints from other minorities. And so that's how we got our start.
Got it. Okay, well, that's great. So as we wrap up, I'm going to go back to your tagline. You said, "If you will it, it is no dream." So what's your dream, Nicole? What's your dream? I feel like it's from Pretty Woman. Do you remember that? What's your dream?
What's your dream? What's your dream? What's your dream?
Yes. So what would be your dream?
So I don't know exactly how to articulate this, maybe in probably like 30 seconds that you need it to be. I just want to be treated like everybody else. And by I mean Israel, Jews. I don't want to be treated better. I don't want to be treated worse. But I just want to be considered as part of the global community and be accepted as an equal. And that is something that even with our own state, we're not treated as equals. Being pro-Israel, even that term, annoys me. Do you see a huge pro-Japan movement out there?
No.
I'm pro-Japan. I think Japanese people have a right to self-determination in their ancestral homeland. There's a whole movement pro-Japan. No, it's ridiculous. And so the fact that that term is still even used, and used in some positive way, assumed positive way, to me is a problem. And so my dream is that we're accepted as equals in this world, both as a country and as a people, but then also as individuals. I don't want better treatment than anybody else. I also don't want worse. Just want to be the same in the sense of how people see me as an equal to them, not I want to be like everybody else. I want to be treated the same.
Not to get religious or, biblical on you, but I don't know if that's possible because the misconception is that Jews are a chosen people because they latch onto the word Am Kadosh. Am Kadosh in Hebrew means a holy people, but Kadosh has another word. It means a separate people.
Oh, interesting.
Like
in a biblical sense, I guess.
Well, when God called us his people, he said, you are a separate people.
Yeah.
Meaning, I don't think that we will ever be seen like anybody else. I don't think so. And nor do I think it's like saying, I want to end Jew hatred or eradicate antisemitism. You can manage it. It will never happen. And I think that maybe, I asked you, what's your dream? And here I am kind of.
So your dream is not going to happen.
Not going to happen. But
believe me, I'm aware.
I understand what you're saying as well. The double standards, the selective outrage that people have towards Jews and Israel alone, and to just at least curb that.
Yeah.
So
listen, there's this notion of the chosen people is also something I think about all the time, and it's thrown back in our face endlessly. But I think it also has another meaning, that being Jewish today in modern times, first of all, is like an insane miracle. There's no reason why Jews should even exist anymore. In every generation, there have been very powerful forces intent on ensuring we do not continue. But the fact that we are still here, to me, is a choice also. The fact that Jews survived in the diaspora was a choice. Jews made that choice. Today, we can make that choice to whatever it is that we want, whatever our dream is, you can choose to make it happen. That's kind of where it goes back to me also. It's like, if you will, it is no dream, right?
It's very empowering.
You have self-autonomy. You control your own destiny. That is something very powerful. And when people lose maybe even the notion of my decisions are mine and how I behave in this world is my choice. When you lose that, first of all, it makes it a lot easier to control you. So of course Jews are going to be ousted because we're always like, well, I don't know about that, right? We're never going to conform fully. So you're right. We're never really going to be the same or treated the same.
I don't think we're meant to be the same.
Maybe not. But in this country, as an American citizen, I would like Jews to see themselves the way other minorities see themselves. Currently, that's not happening. I don't know if it is possible, but I'm making the choice in what I do and how I do things to at least get up to that level. That's why when Pure K, when we use the word unapologetic, that was very, and I know it's a mouthful of, a tagline for Pure K12, but unapologetically combating institutionalized Jew hate. So it's not like we're out to eradicate Jew hate, but you better treat us the same in school environments. The laws and the rules apply to us too.
Yes.
Not everybody except, it's everybody. And so, I don't know. There's a choice there. To be continued.
To be continued. Well, thanks so much for joining me. It was really interesting. I loved the conversation about dodgeball. I love the analogy.
I'm like the queen of analogies because I always
love
have to these topics are hard, and bringing it down to something that sort of everyone can also visualize. Like everyone needs to know what it feels like to get hit in the face with a dodgeball. And if you can do that and still go out and play dodgeball,
Absolutely.
You're gonna be okay.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again for joining me. Thanks for listening, for tuning in to everyone on this special episode of Don't Know Much About. We started with Theodor Herzl. We talked about dodgeball. We spoke about ping pong a little bit. We took on some hard topics such as the efficacy of Jewish organizations and why some of them are not doing so well, and talking about, is it even possible to eradicate anti-Semitism? Thanks so much. Tune in for the next episode of Don't Know Much About.